if we see her. Maybe she's not on video. I'm not sure. Oh, 1 second. She's not on video. She's listening. All right. So, welcome. We are going to be having our conversation today about revealing the observable pattern as we are leading towards 2027. And I have with me Moira, my dear friend. And we have this conversation quite frequently because it's sort of this touch base that we have when we're watching things occur that are like very unsettling to our human. Um, and then it's like, oh, hold on. Moira will usually pop up and be like, "Oh, but this is one of those patterns that we're both seeing, and
Yeah.
this is something that's tied to the 2027 unfolding." And I'm going to just jump in because we already were touching base on the topics we're going to cover, and we're both open head, Ajahn, and throat people. So I'm just gonna pull the threads that we already pulled, and we're gonna get started. So the first thing that we felt a need to touch on, and that this conversation bounces off on, is two things, but they're very intricately tied. Is the fertility rates dropping, and the way that that correlates to the boomer population not being able to go into retirement, and also the support systems for boomers just collapsing. And so we usually start. I'm not sure where exactly to start by asking you that because
Well,
hold
let's
on.
let's talk about the population. Let's
Okay, perfect.
let's just start and talk about the population. So,
Hmm.
human design is an experiment. So we experiment within ourselves, and then we learn
Hmm.
to trust it or not.
Hmm.
And once we start trusting it in ourselves, we start trusting it as part of the greater pattern. And in
Hmm.
some ways, there are the two levels of trust moving simultaneously. There is the level of trust that we see with what is happening inside the global patterns that helps us have trust in our own process. So we are in a place between two ways of being, the way of being that is coming to an end and the way of being that is coming into existence. And so we are neither solid matter either side. And solid matter either side, the security of a life is also an illusion, but we have lived with the security and certain pillars of security for a long time, and beliefs in the collective. So one of the beliefs in the collective is there are too many people in the world. Why are there so many people in the world? We must stop having so many people in the world. We can't support so many people in the world. And the underlying part of this belief is that we have done this on purpose. We as humans have done this. In everything that is collective, there is this element of blame, that we as humans are to blame for what is happening, where we are not. We have had, there is, if, I'm in Scotland, we have a lot of parties in very cold, small church halls. Now, if there are only two people in the church hall, they will freeze. But if you get 60 people in the church hall, you don't need heating because the church hall is warm from the bodies. So the number of people in the world has warmed up the planet. We keep saying it's this or that, it's the next thing, but it is the number of people. And we're not needed anymore. We have heated up the planet. So we are no longer needed for the program. These things are not our fault. And the minute we relinquish blame for it,
Hmm.
there is a great sense of relaxation. So we are not to blame. We have done what we came here to do. We each have a life that we are here to live, and we are here to live it to the end as best each of us can. So the population is diminishing. If you look at the news last week, or anyway, in the last 3 weeks, a report from Australia said that the reproduction rate had reached 1.5 children per adult female. and there was
You
no coming
mentioned this.
back. There was no coming back from that. You reached a point where there was no coming back. Well, I say no coming back. If every woman had 13 children, we could come back. But that's not going to happen. So we are heading towards a diminishing population. So we have people, a large quantity of people are older. So 60 to 80, or even 50 to 80. So in 30 years, up to 2050, the population is going to crash because the babies aren't coming. I mean, in places like Korea and Japan and Italy and Britain and America, they're below the 1.5. Some of them are at 0.8. So we're not going to have a replacement population coming in, and that's part and parcel of what Ra told us would happen. And then when we get to 2070, then the people who are 40 will also be going, and then the population will be going, the graph of the population dying will be going steadily up, 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 up. And then we get to 2070, and then it will shoot right up. And then we will have a significantly smaller population. And so the things that we can't do with a smaller population is maintain the way that we live. And the thing that people want to do, governments and people want to do, is maintain the way that we live as long as possible. Now, there is a huge benefit to that because, if you don't want a massive shock to a population system because the whole thing implodes and explodes, then you want to try and manage that as much as you can so that you change what's happening because you're not going to have the support all the way through. So, but there's nobody doing that, which is a completely different story of the program. There is no political leader who is going to say, these are the patterns, this is what we need to do in order to manage our way through this. So essentially, partly we're going to implode as well, because unless a political leader was really amazingly aware and understood that we were negotiating the end of the Roman Empire. It is the equivalent to the end of the Roman Empire. I mean, those people, that empire had been a really long time, through generations and generations. They must have been terrified when their way of life went. And we have terror now in the same way because of this collapse. So the implications are huge. And we can see that some things will happen, like older people like me will never retire. There will be nobody to support our pensions. People are paying into pensions and there's not going to be anybody to support it. So we will actually be needed. We will. I mean, my friend Andrew is 80, his son is 52 and has been made redundant. And he keeps applying for jobs and they're saying, you're too old. And I'm thinking, that is going to turn around so quickly that in the way they're trying to give funding to make women have babies, they're going to give funding to people to get back into the workforce because, it's desperate. And, people blame COVID, for example. So I'm in Edinburgh and we have the best bus service in the world. We have this incredible bus service. It's fantastic. But during COVID, they let everybody who was 50 or whatever retire. And then then the buses came back and
working.
And so we're like 300 bus drivers down, and the buses aren't running as well as they were, and people are taking it out on the bus drivers, and so that is an example of seeing it in front of my eyes. But I read about train delays, plane delays, baggage being lost, all of those things, and we're moving into another area. I will let you talk.
No, I've been seeing the same thing. And you're right. We blame it on COVID. We blame it on that the mentality of people has changed since COVID, and that the main way that we create blame around it in the United States is people aren't willing to work for that little anymore. And I found myself having this conversation many times, and I found myself even saying that as I'm like reminding myself that I've said this recently. Um, and I thank you for calling that out because it's like this. They did. They had the same thing happen with our bus systems where they had a whole bunch of people drop. We can't they were having this crisis earlier in the year and over the summer, most notably in Louisville, Kentucky. Actually, I heard about this happening where they couldn't get enough bus drivers to get the students to school, so they didn't know what they were going to do over the summer. I didn't quite ever hear about how that resolved personally, but I'm assuming that that just sort of created something because we had a similar thing going on here, but it wasn't quite as extreme because our population isn't quite as large, if that makes sense, as down there. We're in a smaller county, and it was just sort of people just didn't they weren't offering enough, so they kept on having to bump up how much they were offering to get people to even take kids to school here.
Yeah, I mean, society is upside down. You know, there are all these invisible workers that aren't
Hmm.
paid very much and have done overtime in order to support their families
Hmm.
because they've wanted their holiday. But the price of holidays are going up. Even if they do overtime, they can't afford it. So no, there is no point in busting. There is a point in busting a gut to work when you get great holidays, when your wife is happy, you know, when your husband is happy, when you can give to your children what you want to give to them. But, you know, throw your hands up in the air if you're not. You're not going to
Hmm.
work like that to stand still. Plus, you know, you take another side of it, which is the background frequency has been the 4037. And the
Hmm.
4037 is leaving. It's not going to
Yes.
leave in 2027. It's leaving already. It's been leaving for ages and ages and ages. You know, I live in a small town. We used to have a bank in the town with tellers behind the counter. We used to have a post office. The British Post Office has been one of the very best in the world. And those are all going. You know, all of those things are going. So let's take the banana.
Yes, that's my favorite example of yours.
I love bananas. So a banana to me, if I want a banana, somebody has planted the bananas, somebody has tended to them, somebody else has picked them, somebody else has loaded them onto a truck, somebody else has driven them to the airport, to a ship, to a container. A whole load of people have driven that here to the supermarkets, to the docks where it's been unloaded. People have driven it, people have delivered it. And
Hmm.
that how many bargains? How many bargains? You know, the banana, the apple, the holiday, the healthcare, the every single thing that we have in society is exists because of the bargains inherent in them. And you know, we've had logic as well. We've had
Hmm.
logic, and logic is looking for patterns, it's looking for past and future patterns, but it can't get to energy. And that's one of the reasons why money has been so key for us, because money is energy. Um, so the rich people have gathered the money, and the whole of society is built on these building blocks of
Hmm.
the background frequency. Now, I actually don't think I know very much about this, but I'm beginning to sound as if I do, even to myself. But what I wanted to stop and explain was how the background frequency worked, to give a kind
Hmm.
of visual image of it. So
Hmm.
a
Yeah.
clock it's a clock with layers in it. So in the middle of the clock is you, and then the people and the things you make, then the transits that we see that
Hmm.
influence our lives. And then we go out and we go out and we reach the background frequency and the locks and the keys that don't change and have never changed. Um,
Hmm.
So, so if you imagine it like a big clock and all these hands are moving at different speeds, you know, we're just little people, and our little clock is actually moving quite quickly compared to the
Hmm.
great thing. So the main thing is to let go of the idea that there is blame,
Yes.
you know, and to let go of the idea that it was COVID. Well, I mean, yes, of course it was, but COVID was given to us in order to escalate the move towards 2027.
Hmm.
Everything that comes has come for a reason. We don't know the whole reason for COVID. We don't know the whole reason for everything connected to it. And we will find out probably in time, or we might not. You know, we just don't know. And even then, something might happen that we blame on COVID, but we don't
Hmm.
really know that it's linked. We're just searching for a logical pattern that is
Hmm.
reassuring for us.
Yeah.
That has happened
Yeah.
because of COVID. That's a pattern that we didn't have before, but we now have, and we can use again in the future. So
Hmm.
yeah, we just make things up because we want to be certain. You know, the
Hmm.
collective wants to be certain, and because the collective feels terribly insecure when it's not certain.
Yes.
You know, it's frightening. You know, like in the States, half the people are frightened because of Trump being elected, and the other
Hmm.
half are jubilant. But you know, so and there is grief.
Hmm.
I would like just to touch on one thing about the States, if it while it's
Yes.
in my head,
Yes, please.
which is that I live in an ancient country. I live in an ancient country, and we have lived through many different locks and keys and moving of global consciousness cycles. So this one with the bargain came in 1615.
Hmm.
And I'm diverting a little bit here because I'm a storyteller, so I'm sorry. But uh,
No, it's on topic. It's perfectly on topic. I promise. Keep going.
uh, my my daughter has just moved to university and she is studying history of art. And she can't read all the old texts. She stumbles over the long and difficult words, which are quite natural for me because I read them all as a child. So I know all those difficult words. And anyway, she's studying some artists from around 1600. And
Mhm.
what was like, oh my God, you know, 1651, um, I can see the patterns changing. So it was a Dutch artist, and ships were just going out. They were bringing back things from India that had never been seen before. They were bringing back plants and birds, and, you know, people's minds were blown apart. Of course, it was expansion at that point, and we have contraction. But people's minds at that point were blown apart by how big the world was and their understanding of the world. And so if you lived in Holland as a country, you had a collective memory of before 1615. In Scotland as well, you know, we had Highland clearances in the 1700s, and we go back much further. But the States doesn't. You know, I live
Mhm.
in a city where we have the old medieval town and we have something called the new town. And the new town in Edinburgh is older than the United States of America. And when the Americans come over, I go, this is our new town. And it's full of Georgian buildings from 1750, you know,
Yeah.
and so the thing about America is that there is not a collective memory of going through different states of the global consciousness program in the same way. So,
Mhm.
in that sense, they are the baby, and in some ways, they have elected a baby.
Yes. Um, So I want to tie it back a little bit. So because I've been doing all these selling strategy deep diving, right? And one of the things that is interwoven, that is why what you said is so perfectly interwoven to what I'm feeling drawn to say and was already in my head, is Ra speaks to over and over again in the money course, the bonds made and broken, the bonds made and broken. And that's what you're describing here, is that we do not have this experience of the bonds being made and broken
Yes.
in the way that your country does, and it's part of the collective memory. And that's exactly what you're saying. And to take it back again to what you were saying about political figures being in a position to ease the transition, and
That's really good.
that's right. That's what essentially I feel Kamala was trying to do, but it was seen as a restrictive aspect. And that's essentially why when we were talking about it, we're like, we just chose the chaos timeline, because the the perspective on how to make things happen through the Trump lens is you just pull the thread. You just pull the thread and let whatever happens happen. And I feel why that happened. And I could almost feel that happening. And it was why, like, when Biden was being the opponent, I was like, this is never going to happen. This is never in a billion years going to happen. And I had my parents freaking out at me and personally blaming me for pointing that out. But I was like, I am not voting for Biden because that is a wasted vote, period. It felt a little bit less like that with Kamala because there seemed to be more cohesion for how to continue this like ease into the breakdown. And it seemed like she was going to be offering some cushioning, whether or not it was truthful or not, or able to actually happen or not. That's what she was weaving.
Who would
Um,
she take? Who would she take with her, Artemis? I mean,
that's a good question. Yeah.
you know, um, eh, I have a field beside me, which is such a beautiful field. It sort of undulates and it's green and
Hmm.
lovely. I go there with the dog, and I've been told that they're going to dig it up for the quarry to turn into a quarry. And I
Yeah.
was just heartbroken. But I understood straight away that it wasn't going to make the council any money because the council already had no money.
Hmm.
Everybody has debt. Every single council has debt. Every single government has debt. I don't know who they owe it all to.
Is it a private person who's starting the quarry?
Uh, no, yes, it's private, but the council would have sold the land so that the council would have made money. They would have allowed it to go through. They would have taken a large backhander to allow it to go through.
Okay.
And the lady that was telling me said, we don't see anything improve. And I said, we're not going to because it's just a sinkhole going into debt. It's just going
Mm.
to be a sinkhole. And, somebody said, oh, but you could do it. And I thought, well, yes, of course, I could understand the patterns. I couldn't do anything because I'm a projector. Other people would have to do everything. But none of the other people on the council, if I went in there with my ideas and my vision, nobody
They
would say,
wouldn't care.
no,
No,
because
they would be,
because
you're crazy. You don't make sense.
yes,
Where are you getting this from?
but
Yeah.
that because when you get deep into it, it's not their fault. It isn't their fault. It's nobody's fault. This is not personal. But when you are pedaling hard and not even staying still, when you're pedaling forward hard and going backwards, you cannot come out of that rut. If you imagine you're pedaling into a rut and you're going deeper and deeper into the high walls where you can't see anything, you would have to first stop. And,
Hmm.
so you would have to brake and you would have to stop and you would have to come up for air and you would have to listen and you would have to want something else. You would have to
Hmm.
be able to move beyond the limitations of what you had seen into seeing something else. And
Hmm. Yeah. And I feel
I
like that's, yeah,
yeah,
that's
I just,
exactly what it is.
yeah, we don't have many people who are going to see that and then also have the support around it.
Yeah. Because and I feel like this is why, from a cosmic perspective, this timeline was selected. because it's going to be synthetic to pretend otherwise. And that's part of, I feel like what was being called out when this all happened was we just have to pull the thread. Because I've been saying things like this. I've been saying things like, we can't avoid the thing collapsing. We have to celebrate the collapse. We have to lean into the collapse. We have to trust in ourselves and like start shoring up our own resources. And this is part of what we've been having conversations about.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling with America is that, I mean, I don't know, I'm not political. I don't listen to the news.
Mhm.
I don't do, I don't
I
do
don't
it.
do it very much either.
I don't, so
Just watch it.
I don't know. But I do see patterns.
Mhm.
And it, you know, I live in a mild country, but
Mhm.
America seems full of extremes, and the extreme polarity between the two political groups means there is no way of managing it because
Yeah.
you're losing half the country. You cannot manage something where half the people are in the deep rut because
Yeah.
they're full of fear and horror and um and if that's your rut, then it isn't an unreasonable rut because unless you are following your strategy and your authority, you're not going to get there. So if we go back to Rome, um,
Hmm.
if we go back to Roman times, to those people, it would have felt as big as it does now.
Hmm.
Uh, but it is bigger now because if America goes down, it will implode. If it implodes, it will suck everybody else in with it in a much, much, much bigger way. Um, and what Rome didn't have was human design. What this is the only time between one state and another where we have a way of negotiating it individually.
Um, so one of the other systems that I've studied is something called the law of time, and it's from the Mayan calendar. And I would say that that is the last time in history that we've had a sketch of a pattern because they knew that it was ending back then. And
Yes.
so that's the last time that we've been paying attention to my memory, like on a collective scale, to the unraveling of a pattern and what they needed to do. And what you'll notice is the Mayans literally just disappeared, according to us. Like no clue where they went. Um, and other than like, the ones that were taken and dispersed through slavery, essentially. um, but that's part of the mystery around that culture is they had this elaborate understanding of the patterns and then they just seemed to disappear.
Well, they had no choice. It's not like the understanding changes anything. The understanding is just the understanding. If you don't live as yourself, then it makes no difference. You can understand it till the cows come home. You
Hmm.
can see the patterns and understand it. None of that is, the understanding isn't there. When I took it to the people who are here, thank you. I took a keynote class, and people wanted immediately to go away and study it and write it out more. But the thing is that you have to do three things. You have to write by hand, you have to read aloud, and you have to be witnessed if you're going to change your cells. So
Hmm.
the understanding in itself doesn't make a difference.
It's the
Understanding,
embodiment.
yeah, you have to come back. And human design is not the only way, but once we start simply waiting, we start changing ourselves. And it is coming. The change is coming.
It's
But
happening right now.
oh, it's been happening
Yeah.
for 30 years. It's been coming.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen another 30 years, and there are going to be changes.
Hmm.
But if you're listening, don't despair. Oh,
No, in
no.
fact, I wanted to sort of weave it into that because that's part of what we've been discussing right now is how we accept that we are shifting into this experience of what I've been hearing it called individual ambition age.
Yes.
Um, and that's why I've been realizing, and this is what I see as the pulling of the thread that's just yanking us forward. And the best example that the like analogy that I've heard is before we were floating down the river as a collective. And now with this pulling of this thread, we are now leaning into the current and swimming with it, which is truly what you need to be doing to celebrate the collapse in a way.
Yeah. Well, this is the collective age. But you know, I belonged to a book group for many years, and
Mhm,
we zoomed in COVID, and we would come in and we would go around the room, and each person would tell their story of woe and misery and how hard it was.
mhm,
And and of course, life is hard. I have had a very hard life with a lot of trauma, but I choose not to live there. So when it came to my turn, I said, you know, these are still the days of my life. Each day that I wake up is still a day of my life. And I want this day to be rich and beautiful and have love in it and laughter and yeah, even if I spend my whole day lying down, I have a passive body, and Ra described people like me as almost looking as if we were dead already because we were just like lying down. And I remember from years ago being a young woman thinking, "Oh, my body's so tired, I'll just lie here." And inside myself, I could feel as I lay the depth and magic of my spirit, even though I was lying so still. So it isn't maybe a life that a generator would want, but um, it it did suit me, and so you know it whatever suits you, whatever gives you pleasure. These are still magical days. You know, the
mhm,
birds sing, the owls hoot, the leaves fall from the trees and layer up on the ground. They create soil like our lives layer up inside us, our experiences, and it's the soil of our being that the seeds that we wish for and plant and our desires can be put in, and we can nurture them. So it yes, if we understand what's happening, it gives us a reason and impetus to live our design, to move from the head space of it to the body space of it, to the living of it, to the strategy and authority. And that, you know, nobody else has ever been given that gift. That is a gift of personal fulfillment, whatever we go through. And and
mhm,
and, and I say whatever we go through because it does not mean we're going to have a good or a bad life or any of those judgmental things. But it will mean that we were made to cope with what came to us. And
mhm.
that experience was to enrich us. That's all we have.
So this takes me back to a conversation we were having the last time we were talking about how up until the 70s or so, there wasn't very much information coming back from those who pass away to reincarnate into the crystal, the consciousness crystal. And so what I'm reminded of is how you, when you're saying this right now, is that we are the ones who are taking this information back and truly saturating this new information into the consciousness crystal that is part of that fractal wave. And we're setting the stage right now to be able to have it so that any children who actually come forth post 2027 have the
Because,
information for how to make this
yeah,
occur
I mean,
in a
yeah,
yeah.
that's a huge separate conversation. But yes, so we do. There will be less people in the world. There will be less babies born. This might be for each of us our last incarnation on the planet. And why not live in glory? Why not go out in glory? Why not live all that you were here to live? When most of us die, the people of the older generation, for me, they died and they asked us, they were dying, you know, they asked me, oh, what was it for, Moira? So they did. I hear them adding my name on the end and asking me, and it is for our journey of awareness. It is for our own depth of being and
Hmm.
the experience of our aliveness. Um, that's what we're here for. So, when we trust in that, we will have the life that's meant for us, because it is the only authority we can trust. When the bargain goes, the government is not going to look after us. That bargain has broken down. The
Hmm.
health service is not going to look after us. It's broken down. A lot of our collective assumptions, my mother has a loft full of possessions that she's kept to sell when, the market is good for it. But there will be no antiques because there will be no market to buy antiques. So if you're keeping antiques, unless it's gold or silver, I would get rid of it as soon as you possibly can because,
Even art and stuff like that, right?
well, not if you enjoy it and love it. I
But if
have,
it's just sitting there.
if it's just if it's just sitting there, yeah, and you don't want it and you inherited it and you don't know what to do with it. But I mean, I say this and I'm a terrible hoarder. I've got the 1949, the channel of the hoarder. And, I have a lot of pantries and my children come back and one of my daughters has a new boyfriend and opened all the pantry doors to show all my tins and jars and rice.
Hmm. Hmm. My mother
I
has
went,
similar storage. Yeah.
can you imagine? She said, can you imagine? It's
I
just,
mean, we joke that we're prepared for when the world ends. We would just go to her house because she has all the things and cans and all the stuff. And yeah, no, it's funny how there's that generational thing. I think it's tied to being a boomer in a way because of that fear underlying, right?
I mean, I do have the channel of the hoarder, but yeah, my father was born in 1928. Um, so he was in his mid 30s by the time I came, and I was in my 40s when I had my last child. And of
Hmm.
course, if you um, I was on the radio, I'll just divert away. I keep telling you stories because that's just what I do with my 56.
It's the good one.
For about a decade, I was on the radio every month, every 2 months. They would ring me up and ask me to speak about anything. And as you can see, I can just speak about anything. Um,
Hmm.
um, and they were asking me to speak about recycling. And so I said, yes, I'm a lapsed recycler. And they said, oh, how are you lapsed? I said, well, I used to have hens that ate up all the leftover food. And I used to have guinea pigs that ate up all carrots and all the raw ends of the vegetables. And the chickens died and the guinea pigs died. And so now those things have
You
to go
don't
into
do that.
the recycling bin, which just isn't as good. So I came across, I was happy to say I was a lapsed recycler because I was actually still a really top recycler. And and I spoke about my 4 children, and I said, and I have 4 children. And the man came on the radio after me, and he went, that woman, how can she even think about recycling when she's so irresponsible as to have 4 children? And I started to laugh. And the lady taking the show, Kay Adams, said to me, Moira, she said, you're laughing. Do you have something to say? And I said, yes, I do. I said, it's not the number of children you have that counts. And she said, oh. And he was listening. And I said, no. I said, because I had my children in my 30s and my 40s. And I said, if I had had 2 children when I was 20, if I had children at the same age as my mother and I had 2 children when I was 20, and they had had 2 children when I was 40, then I would have reproduced by 6. by now. And I said, by the
Mhm.
time I was 60, I would have reproduced by, somebody help me with maths, but about, so let's say 12, as opposed to
Mhm.
just 4, because my youngest has just turned 18. So I said,
Mhm.
it's not how many children you have. So, but that story also feeds into the declining population.
Mhm.
It's not just us having one child, it's the fact that we're having it later. And so
Mhm.
we're not repopulating as quickly, which
No.
means that our population will seriously go down.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to take this into the AI conversation we've had a little bit because I know that you don't have quite as negative of a perspective on that at all. The AI and robots coming in to fill in for the base population breakdown for the workers.
Oh, it's only the story about the cafe that
Hmm.
said, she said, I was in a cafe. She said, I was in a cafe. She was horrified. I was in a cafe and a little robot waiter came with my coffee on it. And she said, what's wrong with people? Why aren't they doing these jobs? Thinking, well, no, we've already discussed the fact that they don't want to work for those wages. They don't want the hours. They're not prepared to do the time in the same way. People complain about the lack of work ethic. It's just going. It's not anything to blame or complain about. And I said, but if there are less people in the world and there are less people serving and you still want to go out for a coffee, you could be very grateful that a robot is bringing you your coffee,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
it still allows you to go and have that experience. If they've
Hmm.
got chefs, then it helps you and it helps the
Hmm.
transition. So I'm sure there is also a negative side, because there is a positive and a negative side to everything.
Hmm.
But I don't see any point in rejecting something just because it's new. And when we break down the bargain, the internet is part of the bargain. We have
Hmm.
people maintaining the internet, we have people maintaining the computers, we have people maintaining everything. And it is all going to break down.
Hmm.
It is all going to break down. Um, if I live to 80, then I imagine I will see some of it break down.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
feel very, very blessed I will feel very blessed over my lifespan, because, I grew up as somebody that had to do everything. So I can drill holes in walls, and I can paint walls, art, and toes, for example. I understand how basic electric works. I understand how um, to garden. I'm a hedge witch in my part-time, in
Hmm.
my part-time. So I
Yeah.
have my own apothecary and understand it. And um, what I notice with some young people is that they don't have the skills in the same way.
Hmm.
Um,
Unless you're intentionally seeking them out. And there's
yeah,
definitely that. Yeah. But that's something that we've touched on too, how I've observed this drive to learn it and to find these skills, but it's not a pervasive skill set. It's a very unique, individualized skill set that people have invested a lot of time, energy, and resources into cultivating to be good at homesteading, to understand how to use herbs, to have access to the seeds, and to have a backstock of all of these things for having a garden, for having an herb garden, for having the ability to collect and store foraged um, herbs and other items that are in forests.
yeah, to
And
can and stuff like that. Yeah.
yeah, and to learning how to can. It's the whole thing of, the millennials and the younger the younger generations being like, I'm going to develop grandma skills.
In a sense, there won't really be food worries, because if you think that everybody's house is full of food, full of tins, not everybody's, but a lot of people's are full of tins, and the population reduces and the houses and the tins are left empty,
Hmm.
you'll be able to find food while
But
you
then
live.
Yeah, but we're also then entering into sort of this mentality of what has come out in a lot of the apocalyptic timeline movies and the dystopian timeline movies and
It,
stories, where we're
but
going into other people's spaces to get from them and to hoard it for ourselves then.
well, we do have choices in what we make of it, and we have what we make of it ourselves. But you know, there will be food. The program doesn't want us gone. The program wants
Mhm.
us to survive. And so we will be here until the end of the world as human beings. And so, um, how it pans out in the greater scheme of things, it is all outside it's all outside my control. So, I think I will just about tie up.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
read Byron Katie, and I loved what she said. She said there are three kinds of business in the world. She said there is God's business, which she meant was the global consciousness program and the governments and the collective program.
Hmm.
Not my business, nothing that I can control. All I can do is lose energy fretting over something completely outside my control. And then there are other people's business. There's your business and Susan and Tamara's and Lannon's. I hope I've said your name right. Business. There's everybody else's business. There's my children's business. That's their business. Their life is their life. It's their business. Unless they ask me, I only want what they want. The Moroccan saying, "Libby tibby too." I want what you want for you. And then there is my own business, and that is my strategy and authority to live by. And when you live your strategy and authority, your PHS, your environment, your cognition, all of that comes in. There's no point worrying about the rest. Just start at the beginning. So many people skip the beginning because they want to get 2 years down the road, and we can't. And having studied spiritual things isn't going to help you any earlier. Maybe if you've slept alone, that might help you. If you've slept out of aura with somebody for a long time and you've slept alone for a long time, that's the kind of thing that will help you live your design.
Hmm. All right. Well, it sounds like this is where we're wrapping it up.
I
So
know.
thank you so much. This has been fun.
Wow.
And
But I
I
don't know.
will. The what?
I was so worried. I thought, Artemis has asked me to do this, and I don't know anything. I've got
No,
nothing.
but you.
Got, I don't know what. I wondered if anybody had any questions.
Oh yeah. Do you guys? We can bring you on, and if you want to pop on, I can also here. If you want to turn on your video, if you just want to pop in with audio or listen, I'm gonna just sit here for a moment because I need to let myself. You have a okay. Do you want to come on? Because you can. Here we go. I'm gonna spotlight you if you want. There you go.
No,
Hello.
yeah, it's really interesting. I actually I don't know if you all watch the Theo Vaughn podcast, but he just did one with that guru, and they had a really interesting conversation, which really all took place around this topic of evolution and how we as a species, we've hit the pinnacle of our physical evolution in terms of we're not going to grow multiple limbs. We're not going to do anything more, build on what we've already cultivated. It's all going to be an internal process at this point. But he brought up how, I guess it was the moon. He talked about, the importance of the planets and the moon. And he talked about how, I guess, the ancient Hindus or, I guess, whatever lineage came from, their astrological calculations talked about in about 28,000 years, and this is, 25 to 27,000 years ago, our population is going to dramatically decrease. And he brought up that it's all in part to the moon, because the
Hmm.
moon, if we don't realize, it's it plays key for the women's menstrual cycle, the 28-day cycle, and that it's been slowly going further and further from Earth. In about 400 to 500 years, we'll see the end of the menstrual cycle. So we'll stop being fertile, and our ability to reproduce will
I
Mhm.
Yeah, I suspect we're already stopping being fertile. We just haven't, it's not just that we aren't reproducing, like a lot of people don't marry and don't try. So we're not, it's too expensive. So they're only having one child and some aren't having any. But actually, we're going to find very soon that people who want to have babies can't. So that side of it is going to come in already, because the reduction in the population isn't going to be a war or something like that. In that sense, it's going to be natural. So, and the moon, of course. I mean, my Facebook group is called Gates of the Moon. So you have hit upon something. I am very mad and moonly. The moon is it's Earth wouldn't be Earth without the moon, which gives the gravitational pull, and the gravitational pull, because we are water, is also in us. So absolutely, we are tidal beings in that sense. We are pulled by the moon. The ice goddess, as Ra called her.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, there's definitely, yeah, like you're not gonna just drop off. It's slow, sort of leaving our fertility. And I
Yeah.
guess it makes it interesting. So,
So according to human design and Ra, we will never stop being completely fertile. We will produce raves and we will produce people, but we will just have less of each. So it will reduce, but it's not like it's just going to die and then the last person is going to be here. We are 9-centered beings, and we won't make 11-centered beings. We won't become 11-centered.
sure. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I agree with kind of what's said. But is that um kind
Breaking
of
up a
slipped my
little bit.
mind.
Yeah, I can't quite
Oh,
hear you. I wish I
let me see.
could, but I
Let me see.
can't.
We might have oh, you're coming back.
Does this help with the sound?
Oh
Yes.
gosh,
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I had my
it was
headphones
very
in.
watery before, but yeah.
Well, this is something I wanted to bring up. I didn't know what your thoughts are on this. It's something I've been digesting, which is, so yes, 2027 background frequency shifts, but everyone born before then, we've all been imprinted with the cross of planning in our genes. So I don't know what your thoughts are on, there will be that transition, but everyone before them will still have the cross of planning imprinted in them. So they'll still want to carry on the cross genetically, but
It will help the transition. So the fact that that energy is alive in people will help the transition. So it
Sure.
means 2027 will come, and it won't be a guillotine, a French guillotine cutting us off at the neck. That energy exists in people. I have the 4037 in my design, and it is one of the very popular channels in humans. So as long as people are still living with it, then that energy, like all the energy that exists in the world, in all the population that we have. And that energy will see us through the next sort of 30 years. As we come in, we leave the cross of
sure.
planning. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah, and also just on the cosmic evolutionary sense, we don't lose everything that we've evolved through, given the background frequency now. So I would just, my thoughts are,
Oh, we lost him.
Yeah, we lost him. Never mind.
No, I really wanted to hear what he was going to say.
Oh,
Oh,
here it is.
he's coming back. He's coming back. Oh, all right. Wait, no, we're gonna end. Oh, okay, remove
Find
all.
us. And
Uh,
it would be great if we
okay.
see comment.
Okay. Do you want to just comment it? I don't know if he's checked in yet.
I'm back.
Oh, you're back. You're back. You're back. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So my thought is, because again, these are pretty wild times we're going to be living in, but
Mhm.
the culmination of what it kind of comes out to as we really begin the beginning of the new cycle is, so it won't be as globally scaled, everything that we've had through the cross of planning, but with everyone who has that in their genes, that we would still maintain some semblance, even though it's not going to be anything of what it was during its predominance through
Yeah.
what we've been living. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. That we'll still maintain some stores. There will still be commerce, but it will be on a much smaller scale.
Yeah, and it will take a while. It's not going. As I say, it will come in. It will. We can see it coming in. The thing that we don't know, the variables that we don't know, is that the Ottoman Empire, the Roman Empire, the British Empire were all, as they entered, were all much smaller. So the impact of this one is going to be more global because we have the largest global community ever. So we don't know what it will be. We don't know how we will navigate it as a collective, especially because it's the collective energy that's going. But the energy for people to hold communities together, that's why projectors are here, because projectors are here to hold groups together, to help give them the direction. So when the institutions have gone, people will gather and they will need projectors in a way that they don't need them yet. But the reason that the projector has come in is to be a point of guidance for a group in how to move ahead. So we will still have communities.
Okay,
This is this is what I'm understanding. Yeah. We're not all going to wander off and be savages somewhere.
Sure.
Yeah.
Not drop off. It'll be a slow, and I think that's the thing that, when people talk about 2027's coming, there's still, it feels like it provokes a lot of collective fear, at least in the community, because oh my God, like that consciousness starts to set in. But I think when you look at it, it's not going to be stark. It's going to be transition for sure. But that's where I'm curious, how is it going to look? Is it going to go back to, the sort of times where we're living back in these smaller communities like had prior to the collective movement of all this commerce, to where, your town and your city are actually going to play much more of a role in life than being really plugged into this mass commerce on the global scale, where we're kind of disconnected in a sense from the community.
The scary thing is to accept that we don't know. None of the patterns from the past are going to serve us in the future. So there is an uncertainty is worth meditating on.
Sure.
See, but I see what he's saying coming through. Like that's one of the things we've talked about as well. And I know I've talked with you about both of you about this independently, how I see this being what's happening, this disintegration of the upper tier of authority into much smaller, as I frequently call them, like country states. And you can already see that in how the legislation is shifting, how we're having pockets of you can do things in these certain pockets, things are legal in these certain pockets, things are banned in these certain pockets. And this is something that you and I have talked about, Moira, a lot, is how it's going to shift into a more regional, seasonal access to certain foods where things can naturally grow in those areas without it having to be shipped out, which is why one of my favorite examples of yours is the banana example, because you won't have access to those, unfortunately, where you are. And that's just something you have to accept, is that in order for this to be happening, and this is where I see what's happening in the millennials, is we've already taken that awareness. It's like it was in our DNA already, that we knew that this system is not going to sustain. So in order for us to be what carries it through, we had this underlying need to come back to those roots, to acknowledge the value of those roots, to just be like, this is what I'm accepting. This is what I mean when I say we celebrate and embrace the collapse, is this system, we can pull as much as we want from it right now in order to build up whatever we're building to get us through wherever we're going and whatever we're moving into. But that's how I see we get ourselves to the other side of this, is not by focusing on trying to sustain it. It's not going to sustain. We're clear on that, especially if we're part of this conversation, especially if we're following this pattern already. We are aware this is not going to sustain. So what we're doing is we're pulling what we can as resources through what is. So right now, setting up stuff as a homestead through ordering things off of Amazon, but not thinking that it's going to be there in 10, 15 years. So
but I don't know, that one of the truths that is very difficult to sit with is that we are still in the cross of planning. So yes, it is fading and it is letting go, but we are still in the cross of planning. And as Lalan said, we are programmed by the cross of planning. We have no idea, and we cannot, what it will be like when 2027 arrives. We cannot. So we have to sit with uncertainty. We have to accept that uncertainty and live now, 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 now. That is what we've had. That the people around us are key, but we don't know. We don't know whether we will get there. We don't know what upheaval will be along the way, because even on my Facebook page, somebody said there's chaos in the United States and I'm afraid. So I cannot think how many people are afraid. When that becomes the collective energy, being grounded and embedded in your own strategy and authority is key.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I get the fear and I feel it on all sides. But that's one of the things, like when I look around my environment, there's no chaos right now. And when I look around, there's fear, but it seems to be primarily in people's minds. It seems to be something that they've really built up and created and invoked this feeling of fear in their bodies. And it sounds very callous of me whenever I acknowledge it, because they want me to resonate with their fear. But I can't resonate with it because I don't see it around me. And as much as I see things collapsing, I see the prices going up, I see access being reduced, I also see an increase in like the thing, I feel like it is primarily a fear issue in the people who are not connected to the people around them, who do not have a relationship with their neighbors, who do not actively make themselves a face-to-face part of their community with the people who are in their community, and making sure to have actual connections and intimacy with the people who are around them. And the only intimacy they have is through a screen. Those are the people who are the most in fear, because there's nothing anchoring them into reality.
Yeah,
there's nothing pulling them out of their mind.
I don't know. I mean, I live in Scotland, so we don't have fear in the same way. We haven't just come through a great big political election where the country is divided. I am not in that state, and that is a fearful state. There is it would be wrong to diminish the fear, because it is real as well, to wonder what will happen. the only thing we have is now, now, now. And even if you're emotional, your now is up and down on your wave. It just means that you're not making a decision until you're clear, but you still just have the moment, and it is the joy that you bring to this moment. That's, but
And this is
oh, sorry, I was going to say, I'm sorry, Alan, but I am a projector and I am tired. I have now, I've
If you want to wrap up, can I hear what he wants to say really quickly, and then we'll wrap it up? Okay. Go for it.
I would
What were you gonna say?
just the noticing, you know, you see the transition, the 40-37 being, well, really the 37 transitioning to the 55, the fear that we can't strike the bond anymore. What if we can't make sure we get what we need so that we can feel like a community, transitioning to where is my abundance? You know, this is that transition, being stuck in the emotionality of the background to that's going to shift. There's no emotionality that'll be there. There's that will evaporate. So it's interesting. Yeah. All along this, just the fear and the uncertainty, all the solar plexus theme begins to completely evaporate into, like you're saying, Moira, now, what are we doing now? Who are we connecting with now? All this. But yeah, I could feel you're tired, so I'll stop.
I'm gone now. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, you're good. All right, so let's wrap this up. And I would maybe what I'll do is I'll put together a group around this. So if we want to upload this video and then continue the discussion there, that was what we can do when there's more energy for it. So I'm going to wrap this up, and thank you everybody for attending, and thank you so much for bringing your input in, Lalin. And I'm so sorry. I never say your name right. Can you say your name
It's fine.
correctly for me?
It's Leyland, but that's so
Leyland.
okay.
Okay. Thank you. All right. This is the beautiful thing about being online. So I'm going to wrap this up, and thank you so much, Moira, and thank you to Susan and Tamara and everybody who is going to be watching the replay whenever we get this up. And I will get this up as quickly as possible. Thank you so much. Wrapping things up. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.